My husband begged me to quit my job, but the real reason shocked me. Lydia Harper never thought a promotion would become the beginning of the end of her marriage. On the morning everything changed, she woke up before sunrise. The sky outside their suburban Chicago home was pale gray, the kind of quiet morning that felt peaceful and ordinary. Lydia padded into the kitchen in her slippers, tied her hair into a quick bun, and started the coffee machine. The smell of fresh coffee slowly filled the kitchen. For Lydia, mornings were sacred. They were the only time of the day when the world felt calm enough to think. Her husband Daniel was still asleep upstairs. She glanced at the clock. 6:05 a.m. Lydia opened her laptop on the kitchen table and reviewed the financial report she had stayed up late finishing the night before. The numbers stared back at her in neat rows. Everything balanced perfectly. That was Lydia's specialty. Numbers made sense. People, not always. For 12 years, Lydia had worked at Carter & Klein Financial Group, one of the most respected accounting firms in the city. She had started as a junior accountant fresh out of college. Now she was one of the most trusted financial analysts in the company. Her colleagues joked that Lydia could find a missing dollar in a billion-dollar budget. But today wasn't just another workday. Today was the board meeting. The meeting where senior partners would decide who would become the new chief financial controller. Lydia wasn't expecting much. She had been nominated, yes, but so had two other candidates with more experience. She closed the laptop and took a sip of coffee. At that moment, footsteps echoed from the stairs. Daniel appeared in the doorway, tall, handsome, wearing wrinkled pajama pants and rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He poured himself coffee and sat across from her. "You look nervous," he said. "Big meeting today." "The promotion thing?" She nodded. Daniel shrugged casually. "You'll probably get it." "Probably." Lydia smiled faintly. Daniel had always been supportive of her career, or at least he appeared to be. When they first met, he used to brag about her intelligence to everyone. "My wife is a financial genius," he would tell friends proudly. But lately, something had changed. Subtle things, small comments, like when she worked late, or when she mentioned bonuses. He had started joking about how much she worked. "You love those spreadsheets more than your husband." He always laughed after saying it, but Lydia had begun to notice something behind the humor, something uneasy. Daniel finished his coffee and stood up. "Well, good luck today," he said. Then he leaned down and kissed the top of her head. "You deserve it." Lydia watched him walk upstairs. For a moment, she felt warmth. Then the familiar flicker of doubt returned. Something had been off between them for months. She just couldn't explain what. The office. Carter & Klein's headquarters occupied the top floors of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. When Lydia arrived, the office buzzed with quiet tension. Everyone knew the board meeting was happening. People whispered in hallways, phones rang more quietly than usual. Lydia walked into her office and placed her bag on the desk. Her coworker and longtime friend, Marcus Bennett, leaned against the doorframe. "Well," he said dramatically, "today's the day." Lydia laughed nervously. "You sound more excited than I am." "Of course I am," Marcus replied. "If you get promoted, I get bragging rights." Marcus had been Lydia's closest ally in the company for years. They trusted each other. "Relax," he continued. "You're the best accountant in this building. Flattery won't help." "No, but facts might." Before Lydia could respond, her phone rang. Her assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Miss Harper, the board is ready for you." Lydia stood up slowly. Her stomach twisted. "Okay," she said quietly. "Here we go." The promotion. The boardroom was intimidating. A long, polished table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 6 senior executives sat waiting. At the head of the table sat Edward Carter, the company's founder, a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Miss Harper," he said warmly, "please sit." Lydia sat down carefully. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Carter folded his hands. "We'll get straight to the point." Her heart pounded. Your board has reviewed your work for the past 5 years, he continued. Your accuracy rate is the highest in the company's history. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a contract. We would like to offer you the position of Chief Financial Controller. Lydia blinked. Me? Carter smiled slightly. Yes, you. The salary listed in the contract made her heart skip. It was nearly double her current pay, plus company shares. Company shares that could grow into millions. You would also oversee all corporate audits, Carter added. The position begins next Monday. For a moment, Lydia couldn't speak. Her entire career had led to this moment. I accept, she whispered finally. Carter nodded approvingly. Excellent decision. As Lydia left the boardroom, her legs felt weak. Marcus was waiting outside. Well? He asked eagerly. She held up the contract. Marcus's eyes widened. You got it! He hugged her right there in the hallway. You deserve this more than anyone. Lydia laughed in disbelief. For the first time that day, she felt pure happiness. Her life was changing. She just didn't realize how much. Daniel's reaction. That evening, Lydia drove home glowing with excitement. She stopped at a bakery and bought Daniel's favorite chocolate cake. She wanted to celebrate. When she entered the house, Daniel was sitting on the couch scrolling his phone. Guess what? She said excitedly. He looked up. Well, I got the promotion. Daniel froze. For a brief moment, something strange crossed his face. Not excitement, not pride, something else. Then he forced a smile. That's great. Lydia blinked. That's it? Of course it's great, he said quickly. He stood and hugged her, but the hug felt stiff. So you're the big boss now, he joked. Almost. They sat down to eat cake, but Daniel seemed distracted. Finally, he said something unexpected. Maybe this is a good time for you to slow down. Lydia frowned. What do you mean? You've worked non-stop for years. He leaned back casually. Maybe you should quit. She stared at him. Quit? Yeah, focus on family. Life's not just work. Lydia laughed nervously. You want me to leave the biggest job of my career? Daniel shrugged. You don't need it. His tone was strange, too casual, too rehearsed. We're doing fine financially. Lydia studied his face. Something wasn't right, but she brushed the thought aside. Let's talk about it later, she said. Daniel nodded, but his eyes looked distant. The phone call. 3 nights later, Lydia awoke around midnight. The house was dark. Daniel wasn't in bed. She heard his voice downstairs, whispering. Curious, Lydia walked quietly toward the stairs. Daniel stood in the kitchen speaking on the phone. His back faced her. Then Lydia heard the sentence that froze her blood. If she quits her job, Daniel said quietly to the phone, our company shares automatically transfer to me. Lydia's heart slammed against her ribs. She stood completely still. The voice on the phone asked something she couldn't hear. Daniel replied calmly, yes, the paperwork is already arranged. Lydia felt the floor shift beneath her feet. What paperwork? What shares? Then Daniel said something even worse. And once that happens, the money moves through the shell account. Lydia stopped breathing. Shell account? That was not a normal financial term. That was the language of fraud. And suddenly, Lydia realized something terrifying. Her husband wasn't just worried about her working too hard. He wanted her to quit for a reason connected to millions of dollars. And somehow, she was part of the plan. Lydia stood frozen on the stairs. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure Daniel would hear it. If she quits her job, Daniel repeated quietly into the phone. There was a pause. Then he added something that made Lydia's stomach twist. Yes, the board trusts her completely. No one will suspect anything. Lydia felt cold, completely cold. Her husband was talking about her company, about her position, about her shares, and it sounded like she was somehow part of a plan she knew nothing about. She forced herself to breathe slowly. Daniel continued speaking in a low voice. "Relax," he said. "Everything is almost ready. Once the shares move, we can finalize the transfer." Another pause. Then he laughed softly. "You worry too much." Lydia stepped back quietly before he could turn around. Her mind raced. Shares transfer? Shell account? Finalize the transfer? Those weren't casual words. Lydia had spent 12 years working in corporate finance. She knew exactly what those terms meant. They meant money laundering, or worse. She slipped back into the bedroom and climbed into bed just seconds before Daniel came upstairs. A moment later, he entered the room. The mattress dipped as he lay down beside her. "Couldn't sleep?" he whispered. Lydia kept her breathing steady, pretending to be asleep. After a few minutes, Daniel turned off the lamp. The room went dark, but Lydia didn't sleep at all. Lydia forced a polite smile as she sat down at the table. Inside, her mind was racing. Victor Langford, the same man whose name appeared on the suspicious payments, the same man who added the strange clause to her contract, and now he was casually having dinner with her husband? Daniel poured wine into her glass. "Victor and I have been working together on some consulting projects," he said. Lydia nodded slowly. "Really?" Victor smiled confidently. "Yes, your husband has a brilliant strategic mind." Lydia almost laughed at the irony. Strategic mind. She wondered if that was what they called corporate fraud these days. The waiter arrived and took their orders. Small talk followed. Weather, business trends, travel. But Lydia noticed something interesting. Every time the conversation shifted toward Carter and Klein, Daniel quickly changed the subject, almost like he didn't want Victor saying the wrong thing. Finally, Victor leaned forward. "So, Lydia," he said casually, "Daniel tells me you just received a major promotion." "Yes." "That must come with a lot of responsibility." "It does." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes positions like that can be overwhelming." Lydia felt tension rise in her chest. "Not for me." Daniel laughed lightly. "Lydia is a workaholic." Victor smiled again. "Well, sometimes the smartest people know when to step back." Lydia understood the message immediately. They were planting the idea again. Quit your job, step back, resign. Her fingers tightened around the wine glass. They were pushing her toward the exact thing Daniel mentioned on the phone. And now Lydia was sure. This dinner wasn't friendly. It was part of their plan. Lydia starts listening carefully. Halfway through dinner, Lydia excused herself. "I'll be right back." She walked calmly toward the restroom, but instead of going inside, she stopped in the hallway. Her heart pounded. Then she pulled out her phone and turned on the voice recorder. If Daniel and Victor were planning something illegal, she needed proof. She walked back to the table and placed the phone face down beside her purse. The recorder continued running silently. Victor was talking again. "Corporate shares are a powerful asset," he said. Lydia pretended to focus on her food. Daniel nodded. "Exactly." Victor took a sip of wine. "Ownership structures change all the time." Lydia raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Victor smiled. "Well, executives resign, shares get reassigned, investors step in." Daniel added casually, "Sometimes it's better for everyone if the right person holds the shares." Lydia's heart skipped. The right person. She looked directly at Daniel. "And who decides who the right person is?" Daniel smiled smoothly. "Opportunity decides." Victor chuckled. "Well said." Lydia forced herself to stay calm, but inside, a terrifying realization was forming. They weren't just discussing business, they were discussing her shares. A dangerous clue. Dinner ended an hour later. Victor stood up and shook Lydia's hand again. "It was wonderful meeting you," he said. "You too," Lydia replied politely. But as Victor walked away, Lydia noticed something odd. Daniel seemed relieved, too relieved, almost like the meeting had gone exactly as planned. They walked toward the parking lot together. Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "So, what did you think of Victor?" "He seems confident. He's one of the best corporate lawyers in the city." Lydia glanced at him. "How long have you known him?" Daniel hesitated. "Not long, a few months." Lydia said nothing, but inside she was thinking about the payments. 3 months ago, exactly when Daniel claimed he met Victor. Nothing about this was a coincidence. The recording. Later that night, Lydia sat alone in the living room. Daniel had gone to bed. Her laptop glowed softly on the coffee table. She pressed play on the recording. The conversation from dinner filled the room. At first, it sounded harmless, casual business talk. But then, Victor said something that made Lydia sit up straight. "Once the shares move, the investment group will finalize the acquisition." Lydia froze. "Acquisition?" Daniel's voice followed. "And she won't suspect anything?" Victor laughed quietly. "Why would she? The clause is perfectly legal." Lydia's heart pounded harder. Victor continued. "Once Lydia resigns, the shares transfer to you. After that, the investors take control." Daniel replied calmly. "And the money?" Victor's voice dropped lower. "Transferred through the offshore accounts." Lydia stopped the recording. Her hands were shaking. Now she understood. Completely. Daniel and Victor were planning to take control of Carter and Klein, and Lydia was the key. Her promotion gave her executive shares. If she resigned, those shares would transfer to Daniel. Then Daniel would hand them to a group of investors who could secretly take control of the company. It was a corporate takeover, and Lydia was the pawn. Something even worse. But one question still bothered her. Why would Daniel do this? A corporate takeover required millions. Daniel didn't have that kind of money. So who were the investors Victor mentioned? Lydia returned to the company database. She searched for recent investment inquiries. Then a name appeared, a private investment group, Black Ridge Capital. Lydia's breath caught. Black Ridge Capital had a reputation, not a good one. Several companies they acquired later collapsed under mysterious circumstances. Executives were investigated, employees lost their jobs, entire businesses disappeared, and now they were targeting Carter and Klein, using Lydia as the entry point. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Marcus. "Marcus, something strange just happened." Lydia typed quickly. "Lydia, what is it?" 3 dots appeared as he typed. Then the message came. "Marcus, someone from Black Ridge Capital requested a meeting with the board tomorrow." Lydia's blood ran cold. Tomorrow. Everything was moving faster than she expected. If the board agreed to meet them, the takeover process might already be starting. And Daniel expected Lydia to resign soon, which meant the final step of the plan was coming. Lydia realizes the truth. Lydia leaned back on the couch. Her world suddenly felt dangerous. Her husband was part of a multi-million-dollar corporate scheme. A powerful investment group was involved, and a corrupt corporate lawyer was helping them. But Lydia had something they didn't expect: proof. She looked again at the recording on her phone. Victor's voice echoed in her mind. "Once the shares move, the investment group will finalize the acquisition." Lydia whispered quietly to herself, "You wanted me to quit." A small, determined smile formed on her lips. "But instead, I'm going to ruin your plan." Lydia didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at the city lights through the window. The recording from the restaurant replayed in her mind again and again. Victor's voice, Daniel's calm answers, and the sentence that kept echoing. "Once Lydia resigns, the shares transfer to you." Her husband had been planning this for months, maybe longer. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself. The betrayal hurt more than she expected. This wasn't just business. This was her marriage, her trust, her entire life. But Lydia had spent her career analyzing problems logically, and right now she needed to think like an accountant, not a wife. Step 1, gather evidence. Step 2, understand the full plan. Step 3, stop it. She closed her laptop and whispered quietly to herself, "You picked the wrong woman to manipulate Daniel." Marcus gets involved. The next morning, Lydia arrived early at the office. Marcus was already there. He looked concerned. "You sounded serious in your message last night." "I was." She closed her office door. "Marcus, I need you to promise something." He raised an eyebrow. "That depends on what you're about to say. If I tell you something, you can't repeat it to anyone, not yet." Marcus nodded. "You have my word." Lydia took a deep breath. "My husband is involved in a corporate fraud scheme against this company." Marcus blinked. "Wait, what?" She pulled out her phone and played part of the recording. Victor's voice filled the room. Marcus's expression slowly changed from confusion to shock. When the recording ended, he stared at her. "Is that Victor Langford?" "Yes." "And Daniel is your husband?" "Yes." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "This is insane." "I know." He rubbed his forehead. "So let me get this straight. They want you to resign so your shares transfer to Daniel, and then they use those shares to help an investment group take over the company?" "Exactly." Marcus shook his head slowly. "That's not just fraud. That's corporate sabotage." "And it gets worse," Lydia said quietly. She opened her laptop and showed him the suspicious consulting payments. Marcus stared at the numbers. $2.1 million? Paid to Daniel's company. Marcus looked stunned. "Your husband has been taking money from this company?" "Yes." "And Langford approved it?" "Every payment." Marcus sat in silence for a moment. Finally, he said something Lydia hadn't. The next morning, Lydia woke up with a strange sense of clarity. For days, she had felt overwhelmed by betrayal, anger, and confusion. But now, something inside her had shifted. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She had a plan. Daniel slept peacefully beside her, unaware that everything was about to change. Lydia quietly got out of bed and went downstairs. The house was silent. She opened her laptop at the kitchen table and began organizing everything she had collected so far. The suspicious payments, the contract clause, the Blackridge Capital records, the offshore transfers, and most importantly, the recording of Daniel and Victor. Piece by piece, the evidence formed a clear picture, a corporate takeover scheme worth millions. But exposing it would require help, people far more powerful than Lydia alone. She took a deep breath and opened a secure government reporting site, the kind accountants used when reporting corporate financial crimes. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Submitting this information would change everything: her marriage, her career, her safety. But Daniel had already crossed the line. He was willing to destroy her life to make millions. Lydia pressed submit. Marcus has another discovery. Later that morning, Marcus rushed into Lydia's office. He looked pale. "You're not going to like this," he said. "What happened?" Marcus closed the door behind him. "I checked internal security logs." "Why?" "Because someone accessed your financial investigation files last night." Lydia's heart skipped. "What?" "Someone inside the company opened the same transaction reports you were reviewing." "Who?" Marcus hesitated. "That's the strange part. The login belongs to someone from the legal department." Lydia's stomach tightened. "Victor." Marcus nodded slowly. "He must have realized someone was looking at the payments. That means he knows, or at least suspects." Marcus leaned closer. "If Victor is watching the system, we have to be careful." Lydia nodded, agreed. But inside, she felt something else. Pressure. The situation was escalating quickly. Daniel becomes curious. That evening, Lydia arrived home to find Daniel cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen. "Wow," Lydia said. "You never cook." Daniel smiled. "Special night." Lydia sat at the counter. "What's the occasion?" Daniel placed 2 plates on the table. "I just wanted to spend time with my wife." His tone sounded warm, but Lydia had learned something important. Daniel was very good at pretending. They ate quietly for a few minutes. Then Daniel asked a simple question. "How's work going?" "Busy." "Still settling into the new role?" "Yes." Daniel watched her carefully. "Have you thought any more about quitting?" There it was again, the same question, the same push. Lydia wiped her mouth with a napkin. "I'm thinking about it." Daniel immediately smiled. "Really?" "Maybe." His excitement was impossible to hide. "That would be great," he said quickly. "We could start fresh." Lydia nodded slowly, but inside she was thinking something very different. Keep believing that, Daniel, because the longer he believed she might resign, the more careless he would become. The hidden laptop. 2 nights later, Lydia made an unexpected discovery. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch. His laptop sat open on the coffee table. Normally, he was very careful with it, always closing it, always locking the screen. But tonight he must have been too tired. The screen still glowed softly. Lydia walked closer. Her heart began beating faster. If Daniel was moving money through shell companies, his laptop might contain the proof. She glanced toward the couch. Daniel was snoring lightly. Slowly, she sat down and moved the laptop closer. The screen displayed an email inbox. Most messages were business-related, but one folder caught her attention. Projects Private. Lydia clicked it. Inside were dozens of encrypted documents, bank transfer records, investment agreements, and something even more disturbing, a spreadsheet labeled Carter & Klein Acquisition Timeline. Lydia opened it. The plan was laid out step by step. Phase 1, secure executive shares through Lydia. Phase 2, transfer shares to Daniel Harper. Phase 3, transfer controlling interest to Black Ridge Capital. Phase 4, liquidate company assets. Estimated profit, $85 million. Lydia's hands trembled. $85 million. They weren't just planning a takeover, they were planning to destroy the company completely. She continued scrolling. Then she found something that made her breath stop. A note written by Victor. "If Lydia becomes suspicious, accelerate resignation pressure." Lydia looked toward the couch again. Daniel shifted slightly in his sleep. Her pulse raced. They had already considered the possibility that she might discover the truth, which meant Daniel was prepared to push harder, maybe even desperate measures. A terrifying realization. Lydia copied several files onto a small flash drive. Her hands moved quickly. She had to finish before Daniel woke. But as she scanned the documents, one final file caught her attention. Contingency plan. Her stomach tightened. She opened it. Inside was a short message from Victor. If Lydia refuses to resign, alternative solutions must be considered. Below it, Daniel had replied with one sentence, "I'll handle it." Lydia felt a chill run down her spine. Handle it? What did that mean? Would Daniel try to frame her? Destroy her reputation? Or something worse? For the first time, Lydia truly understood the danger she was in. This wasn't just financial fraud anymore. Her husband might be willing to do anything to protect the plan. Someone is watching. The next day, Lydia arrived at work feeling uneasy. She entered the office building and walked toward the elevators. But halfway across the lobby, she felt something strange. Someone was watching her. She turned slightly. A man in a dark suit stood near the entrance. He quickly looked away. Lydia stepped into the elevator, her heart beating faster. By the time she reached her office floor, Marcus was waiting. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said. "Maybe I did." "What happened?" Marcus closed the door behind him. "I checked internal security logs." "Why?" "Because someone accessed your financial investigation files last night." Lydia's heart skipped. "What?" "Someone inside the company opened the same transaction reports you were reviewing." "Who?" Marcus hesitated. "That's the strange part. The login belongs to someone from the legal department." Lydia's stomach tightened. "Victor." Marcus nodded slowly. "He must have realized someone was looking at the payments. That means he knows." or at least suspects. Marcus leaned closer. If Victor is watching the system, we have to be careful. Lydia nodded, agreed. But inside, she felt something else. Pressure. The situation was escalating quickly. 3 days later, Lydia received the message she had been waiting for. It arrived as a short email from an unfamiliar address. "We received your report. We need to meet immediately." No signature, no details, but Lydia knew exactly who it was. Federal investigators. Her heart beat faster. Everything was about to come to a head. The secret meeting. That afternoon, Lydia left the office early and drove to a quiet cafe across town. 2 people were waiting at a corner table, a middle-aged man and a younger woman. They introduced themselves simply. "Daniel Wright, Financial Crimes Division," the man said. The woman nodded. "Agent Carla Simmons." Lydia sat down and slid the flash drive across the table. "This contains everything." Agent Wright plugged it into a laptop. For a few minutes, the agents reviewed the documents silently. Bank transfers, shell companies, Victor's emails, Daniel's acquisition plan. Finally, Wright looked up. "This is extremely serious." "I know." Agent Simmons leaned forward. "Do you understand what you've uncovered? A corporate takeover scheme." "More than that," Wright said. "This group has been under investigation for years." "Blackridge Capital?" He nodded. "We suspected they were destroying companies through insider manipulation, but we never had proof." Lydia's voice was steady. "You do now." Wright closed the laptop. "Yes." He looked directly at her. "And we're going to stop them." The clock is ticking. Before leaving, the agents shared one piece of information Lydia didn't expect. "The takeover is scheduled for Friday morning," Simmons said. Lydia's eyes widened. "That's 2 days away." "Exactly." Blackridge planned to present a major investment proposal to the board. Once the shares transferred to Daniel, the acquisition would begin immediately, which meant Lydia had to play along until the last moment. "You need to act normal," Wright told her. "Pretend you're still considering resigning." Lydia nodded slowly. She understood. This wasn't over yet. Daniel makes his final move. That evening, Daniel was unusually cheerful. He poured champagne at dinner. "Celebrating early?" Lydia asked. Daniel smiled. "I just have a good feeling about the future." "What kind of future?" "A new beginning for both of us." Then he leaned forward. "Have you made